Welcome back to my channel. I am the Crochet Hermit. In this video, we are making a V-stitch crochet skirt. I'm making a size medium, but I will show you how to alter the pattern to fit any size that you desire. I put a chart together to help those of you following your own measurements. You need to know your waist, hip, and length of skirt measurements. We are going to start at the waist. My waist measurement is 28 inches. Replace my measurement with yours for a perfect fit. Grab your yarn and 5mm hook. Make a slip knot. You want to have a long enough tail to weave in at the end. I'm gonna chain 94 chains. This is roughly around 26 to 30 inches, and this is the measurement of my waist. If you are following your own measurements, you need to chain an even number. One of these chains is gonna count as a turning chain. I'm finished with all of my chains. When you measure your chains, stretch it out a little bit, don't overstretch it. When I lay this on the measuring tape, it goes to 26 inches and it does stretch out to 30. Stretching out your chains give you a more accurate measurement because as you start working inside these chains, they will stretch out and you don't want your project bigger than what you desire it to be. For row number 1, you're going to insert your hook inside the second chain from the hook. Place a double crochet. If you do not know how to double crochet, I will have a video linked in the description of how to crochet the main stitches. We are going to place double crochets inside each stitch in this row. You should have a total of 93 double crochets when you are finished. If you are following your own measurements, that is one chain less than how many chains you started with. I will meet you back when I'm finished with row number 1. This is what it looks like when row 1 is complete. Your first row has to be an odd number of stitches. And I already feel like I'm going to get this question in the comments. Yes, we started off with an even number, but we did skip that first chain. So now we're at an odd number. Chain 1 and turn your work. We are chaining 1 in between all of our rows. For row number 2, we are working V-stitches. Inside this first stitch, we are going to place 2 double crochets. 2 double crochets inside 1 stitch. This is what it looks like when I have my 2 double crochets inside that 1 stitch. We have just made our first V-stitch. I'm going to skip the next stitch, and inside the stitch after that, we are going to place 2 double crochets. This is our second V-stitch. I'm going to skip the next stitch, and inside the stitch after that, we are going to place 2 double crochets. Continue the pattern of skipping 1 stitch and placing 2 double crochets inside the next stitch, and so on all the way until you reach your last stitch. I finished my V-stitches for row 2, and now we are going to chain 1 and turn our work. I'm going to show you guys how to count your V-stitches. If you are following along with my measurements, you should have a total of 47 V-stitches. This is our first V-stitch, these 2 double crochets right here. This is our second V-stitch, this is our third, and this is our fourth, and so on. You should have a total of 47 V-stitches. Grab 2 stitch markers. We are going to mark our hip placements. Starting from the beginning, you are going to count to your 12th V-stitch and place a stitch marker inside the middle of the V-stitch. This is my 12th V-stitch right here, and I'm going to insert my stitch marker in between these 2 double crochets. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm going to count to 12 and place my stitch marker inside my 12th V-stitch. When I fold it, it should look like this. These 2 ends where your stitch markers are is where we will increase for our hips. If you're following your own measurements, I'm going to show you how to do this for yours. So grab your work and fold it in half like this. Grab a stitch marker and place it into the corner that does not open. Now you can open your work, fold the 2 ends into the center where that middle stitch marker is. In the 2 sides, the 2 corners, I already have my stitch markers placed, but this is where you will be placing your stitch markers. Right in between the 2 double crochets. Also keep in mind where you place your stitch markers, the numbers need to match. So for example, I have 12 V-stitches on this side, so the other side is 12 V-stitches as well. The numbers need to match, so your sides are equal. Remove the stitch marker in the middle, you only need the 2 on the side. Up next is our hips. You need to know half of whatever your full hip measurement is. For example, my full hip measurement is 37 inches, but half of that is 18.5. Replace my measurement with yours for a better fit. For row number 3, we're going to be increasing inside the stitch markers so we can reach our hip measurements. Inside this first V-stitch, which is these 2 double crochets right here, we are going to place a V-stitch. So that means we are going to place 2 double crochets in between these 2 double crochets. Whenever you guys hear me say a V-stitch, that is 2 double crochets. And this is what it should look like. Inside that next V-stitch, I'm going to place a V-stitch. So that is 2 double crochets in between these 2 double crochets. And that is all it is to it. We are going to continue placing V-stitches in between these V-stitches all the way until you reach your stitch marker, and I will meet you back when I make it to my stitch marker. I made it to my stitch marker. I haven't placed anything inside of it yet. Your work should look like this so far. We are going to work our increases inside the 2 double crochets where the stitch marker is at. So these 2 double crochets we are going to increase inside the stitch and not the space. We are going to place a V-stitch, that is 2 double crochets inside this double crochet stitch. Inside the double crochet on the other side of the stitch marker at the very top, we are going to place a V-stitch. It should look like this. We are finished with our first increase, and now I'm going to remove the stitch marker and place it right in between these 2 V-stitches. Do not skip this step, always mark your stitches. Now you're going to continue working your V-stitch like you normally would inside the space of your V-stitch. You're going to continue doing this all the way until you reach your other stitch marker. I've made it to my stitch marker, and we're going to be increasing in this stitch like we did in the beginning. So inside this double crochet right here, we're going to place a V-stitch. And now for the other double crochet right here, this one right here, we're going to place a V-stitch. So now we're going to remove that stitch marker and we're going to place it in the space in between these 2 V-stitches that we just did. You're going to continue working V-stitches like you normally would for the rest of this row. This is what it looks like when row 3 is complete. Make sure to chain 1 and turn your work. So inside this V-stitch, we're going to place another V-stitch. This is row number 4. We are going to continue placing V-stitches in between these V-stitches all the way until you reach your stitch marker. So I've made it to the part where my stitch marker is. So we're going to be increasing, but we're going to increase differently than we did in the last row. So inside this V-stitch right before the stitch marker, we are going to place a V-stitch like we normally would. Now inside this space, which is a space, it's not a V-stitch, we're going to place a V-stitch inside that space with a stitch marker. Now inside this next V, we're going to place a V-stitch. Now I'm going to remove that stitch marker. This V-stitch in the middle, this one right here, I'm going to place my stitch marker. And now we're going to continue working V-stitches all the way down until we reach our other stitch marker. So I made it to the V-stitch that's right before the stitch marker. So inside this V-stitch, I'm going to place a V-stitch. So inside that space where that stitch marker is, I'm going to place a V-stitch. I'm going to remove the stitch marker and place it in the middle of this V-stitch that we just worked. And inside that next V-stitch, I'm going to place a V-stitch. And now we're going to continue working V-stitches for the rest of this row. This is what it looks like when row 4 is complete. For row 5, we're going to repeat row 3. So we're going to work V-stitches into every V-stitch until we reach our stitch marker. I have made it to where my stitch marker is, and this side my stitch marker is in between a V-stitch. So because it's in between a V-stitch and not a space, we're going to be placing our V-stitch at the top of the double crochet. So inside this double crochet right here, we are going to place a V-stitch. Now for the other double crochet, which is the other side of the V-stitch, we are going to place another V-stitch. Now in between these two V-stitches, in that space, we're going to place our stitch marker. And now we're going to continue working V-stitches all the way until we reach our other stitch marker. I've made it to my stitch marker, and now we're going to increase. Now this double crochet right here, we're going to place a V-stitch. And now for the other double crochet right here, we're going to place a V-stitch. Make sure to remove that stitch marker, place it in the space in between these two V-stitches. Always mark your stitches. And we're going to continue working V-stitches as normal to finish off row 5. And I am going faster now because by this point you guys should already really know how to do this part. I am finished with my row. Don't forget to chain 1 and turn your work. For row number 6, we're going to repeat row number 4. So work V-stitches all the way down until you reach your stitch marker. I've made it to my stitch marker. This V-stitch right before the stitch marker, I'm gonna place a V-stitch. Now inside that space with the stitch marker, I'm gonna place a V-stitch. Now I'm going to remove the stitch marker and place it in between this V-stitch. So in between these two double crochets. Continue working V-stitches until you reach your other stitch marker. I have made it to the corner where my stitch marker is. So inside this V-stitch right before the stitch marker, I'm going to place a V-stitch. Inside the space with the stitch marker, I'm going to place a V-stitch. And now I'm going to remove this stitch marker and place this stitch marker in between these two double crochets. Continue working V-stitches for the rest of this row. Chain 1 and turn your work when you are finished with row number 6. Don't forget we chain 1 in between all of our rows, but before we continue, I want to show you what my project is looking like so far. It's going to start shaping an upside down U. If you fold them into each other, it will look like this. So as we continue, our skirt is getting wider and wider. You are going to repeat rows 3 and 4 until you reach row 13. This is the width of my hips, and this is roughly around 18.5 inches wide. If you are following your own measurements, repeat row 3 and 4 until you reach the measurements of your hips. Rows 3 and 4 is timestamped at the bottom if you need to rewatch them. I have completed all 13 of my rows, and this is what it looks like. If you fold them into each other, it will look like this. Last up is the length of the skirt. I'm doing a measurement of 14 inches. Replace my measurement with yours for a better fit. Now for row 14, we are going to work a regular row, which means we will not be increasing anymore. So you can go ahead and remove your stitch markers. Now we're just going to work a regular row of V-stitches. So I'm coming up to the corner. And remember, we are not increasing anymore. So I'm just going to work V-stitches inside the V-stitches just like normal. And I'm going to continue to work V-stitches inside every stitch all the way until I reach my last V-stitch. I'm not going to chain one for the end of this row. Instead, I'm going to fold the work into each other. I'm going to take my hook and inside the very first double crochet, this double crochet right here, this very first stitch, I'm going to slip stitch into it. And I'm going to slip stitch these together. And now I'm going to turn my work. For row 15, we will continue our V-stitches with no increases. Inside this V-stitch, we're going to place a V-stitch. Grab a stitch marker and place it inside the first double crochet, not the space, but the stitch itself. So the first double crochet. And we're going to continue working our V-stitches all the way around. Continue working V-stitches all the way around, and I'll meet you back towards the end to show you how I finish this row. You'll know you made it to the end of the row because you will reach the split, which is the opening. I'm finishing up my last V-stitch right now. It should look like this. Now inside that stitch with the stitch marker, I'm going to insert my hook and place a slip stitch to finish this row. Turn your work. For row 16, continue working V-stitches with no increases. And don't forget to mark that first double crochet with a stitch marker. Continue working V-stitches all the way around until you reach your last V-stitch. You'll know it's your last V-stitch because it's one V-stitch before the stitch marker, and also you will reach the part of the skirt that opens. I'm finishing up my last V-stitch right now. Now inside that stitch with the stitch marker, I'm going to insert my hook and place a slip stitch. Continue to repeat row number 14, which is regular rows of V-stitches, until you reach row 34, which is 13 inches long, and that is 1 inch less than my desired length of skirt. If you are following your own measurements, continue to repeat row number 14 until you reach the length of your skirt. Make sure that the length is 1 inch less than your desired length, because we will be adding an additional row when you are finished with this. Row 14 is timestamped at the bottom if you need to rewatch it. This is what it looks like when all my rows are complete and I am satisfied with the length. Before we get started, you need to figure out which side is your good side. So I'm perfectly fine with this side being my good side. If you don't like this side, flip the skirt inside out. This is our very last row and we are going to work double crochets. So chain 1 and we are placing double crochets inside of the stitches and not the space. So we're no longer working V stitches. So inside this first stitch, we're going to place a double crochet. Place a stitch marker inside that first stitch. And I'm going to continue working double crochets for the rest of this row. I have made it to the end of my row. And now I'm going to slip stitch into the stitch with the stitch marker. And then I'm going to chain 1 and cut the end of my yarn. Make sure to leave a long enough tail that you can weave in at the end. Turn the skirt upside down. We're going to create the holes for our straps. We're going to place a stitch marker right in the middle of the split. Turn the skirt to the side and grab your 4mm hook and make a slip knot. We're going to begin on this side right here. All the way at the top, you're going to insert your hook right where that double crochet is in that space, and you're going to place a single crochet. Inside the next space in between those 2 double crochets, we are going to place 2 single crochets. Also, I am crocheting over that extra string, so I don't have to worry about it later. Also, work with a looser tension when you are working these single crochets. Inside this next space, I'm going to place 2 single crochets. Inside that next space between the 2 double crochets, we are going to place 2 single crochets. We are going to continue to place 2 single crochets in between the space all the way down until we reach our stitch marker. So I've made it down to my stitch marker and it looks like this so far. And now I'm going to turn my work so I can continue working on the other side. Inside the next space in between those 2 double crochets, we are going to place 2 single crochets. We are going to continue to place 2 single crochets in between the space all the way down until we reach the very last double crochet. Inside this last space, we are placing 2 single crochets. All the other spaces have 2 single crochets besides the first space. Chain 1 and cut the end of your yarn. Make sure you have a long enough tail to weave in at the end. Switch back to your 5mm hook, make a slip knot. I'm going to chain a total of 140 chains. These chains need to be long enough to weave in through the holes in the front and also long enough so that you could tie them. I'm going to grab my needle and weave in the end of my strings. What I like to do is flip it to the inside and zigzag through the stitches, and then I split the yarn in half and tie a knot. I'm gonna finish weaving in the rest of my loose strings off camera. We are gonna weave our strings through these holes. I'm gonna grab my hook in the hole that's the closest to the stitch marker I'm going to insert my hook into. And I'm also going to insert it on the other side of the stitch marker. And then I'm going to grab my string and pull it through. I'm going to even out the string as I'm pulling it through. And then I'm going to cross the strings over, forming an X. I'm going to skip one hole, and then the hole after that, I'm going to insert my hook and pull the string on the right side through that hole. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side, and then I'm going to continue doing this all the way till I get to the top. You can weave in your strings however you like. You can also skip as many holes as you like, or you don't have to skip any holes at all. It is up to you. For me personally, I'm gonna skip one hole each time. Just make sure what you do to one side, you do to the other, because you want both sides to be equal. And lastly, we're going to work on the strings at the bottom. I already did one side. So go ahead and move your project to the side. You're gonna need something that is hard that you can wrap yarn around. I chose to use this. You can use a book, a small box container, whatever that you can find that you can wrap yarn around. So I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna grab my yarn and wrap it around this box. And I'm gonna wrap it around 5 times. And I'm gonna grab my scissors. I'm gonna cut the working yarn that's still attached. And now at the very bottom, I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm gonna cut. And that just helped me cut all these strings at once. They all don't have to be even, we will even them out later, but it should look like this. Now we're gonna bring back our project and we're gonna grab that string. Inside the second chain, we're gonna insert our hook. And now I'm gonna grab all my strings. I'm gonna put it on my hook. And I'm gonna pull it through that second stitch. I'm gonna put my index finger and my thumb inside. With my index finger and my thumb, I'm gonna pull all the strings through the hole. Make sure that you are pulling every single string through that hole. And then you tug on the strings to seal it. I like to pull on all the strings individually to make sure they're fully sealed. You have to do this for both sides, and once you're finished, grab your scissors and even out the bottom. You can have them as long as you like or as short as you like. It is up to you. I prefer them to be shorter. This is the finished look of my V-stitch skirt. I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial and hopefully check out some other tutorials. Tag me in your finished products. I'd love to see them. If you're uncomfortable with tagging me, you can always send me a DM on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching.